Hello and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree, where we are discussing all the topics that create extraordinary breakthroughs in our personal and spiritual development journeys. I'm Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a spiritual coach and Akashic Records channelers who helps sensitives and intuitives connect more deeply with their hearts, intuition, and souls, and teaches people how to process and alchemize the fears and beliefs that hold them back from living in their authenticity and purpose. You're in the right place if you like to hear about spirituality, psychology, healing, consciousness, manifestation, developing your spiritual and intuitive gifts, and living from your heart and soul instead of from your fears and ego. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello everyone and welcome back to Breakthroughs with Bree. This week we are talking about what happens when we don't use our voice, when we don't speak up. A little bit about why we might hesitate if we want to understand that pattern a little bit better, and also some reframes and some soul perspective shifts on how speaking up can be really important and really healthy and even really enjoyable. FYI, guys, I'm going to tease now. I've filled up my one-on-one coaching spots, which is so abundant, so incredible. I'm very, very grateful for all the people I get to work with. But if you still wanted to work with me in some capacity, I'm going to be doing a book club / group coaching program. I'm going to be sort of combining those two things. That's all centered around community as well as creating deep healing and shifts. The price point for this is going to be in the ballpark of one of my single sessions, and it's going to be over a period of months. So if you've wanted to come into a coaching container with me and maybe doing my course doesn't feel right because you're just one of those people that knows that you like to get information in real time, interactively on a Zoom, that you want the community, or maybe like doing such intensive one-on-one work didn't make sense from a time perspective of when the spots were open or from a financial standpoint, then I would highly recommend that you go to my website healingwithbree.net and you get on the wait list for my group coaching program. I have a feeling that this one is going to be on relationships and attachment theory. So if you've ever heard about like the anxious avoidant attachment, this applies to everything. This applies to our own inner child healing, our relationship with our parents. This has to do with dating and romantic relationships and managing those to create more safety and intimacy. And this also gets applied to things like money and opportunities. Like our attachment style reflects everywhere. So I'm really excited to do a group coaching program and like a community program that's centered around learning and healing and transforming the way that we are relating to things to create more ease, to create more intimacy, and to create more bliss, because we all deserve that. Those who get on the group program waitlist are going to have some sort of discount when enrolling in the program. So go to healingwithbree.net or use the link in my bio to get signed up on that list. And I'm really excited to do another group coaching program with you all. When we don't speak up, I work with so many people who have this goal of wanting to be able to advocate for themselves or act more authentically or say their truth or be able to kind of like follow the inspiration that they have like all the way through to the end. And really what's happening is that there is some sort of fear belief and there is some sort of anxiety that stops us from that very natural impulse that we have to express something that feels true to us. It's really important when we want to start manifesting things in our lives, or we just want to start feeling more healthy and balanced even in our bodies or in our state of mind or our emotional health, to attend to how we are expressing ourselves, how we are honoring what we feel in our voice, and being able to feel really confident and grounded that we can and will say what we want to say, and that we can do it in a way that aligns with our values. And most of us have values of respecting other people and of being very kind and generous and being able to be in connection and make people feel good, right? And sometimes I feel like what happens is we think that we have to sacrifice what we want or what we think about something in order to uphold our values or to uphold connection with other people. And living in alignment with our values or being connected with people create a sense of integrity and safety that is like primally important to us. So when we think that speaking up for ourselves could threaten or endanger those things, or just in general that it doesn't feel safe, then we opt to repress it and just not say anything. And this can have a lot of impacts us on so many different parts of our lives. A big symptom of this is going to be that you feel like you're not in relationships with people who are reciprocal with you, who really see you and accept you and understand you, maybe having a lot of social anxiety, maybe having this fear of being seen and fear of taking things that are really vulnerable and exciting to you, like authentic interest, and like sharing them out in the world. Or if you do have some sort of inspiration that does require like you taking that to the public in some way, especially if it's like business related, we got to be able to be seen to attract our people in exchange and all that kind of stuff. Like we feel like this almost crippling anxiety, right? And sometimes these are all symptoms that can lead back to us suppressing and us not expressing our voice and our truth. So let's walk this back to why we might have developed this in the first place. When we are looking at a pattern that doesn't feel like it's supporting us or honoring our soul or our authenticity, we definitely got to look back in early life, because in that 0 to 7 range is one where all of our subconscious programming happens. Like these beliefs and our values about the world, our expectations of the world are usually set then. And our most formative experiences relationally also are set during that time. So when we think back to when we're really young, what I find with people who are really struggling to like speak up for themselves is that there was some kind of dynamic that taught them that speaking up for themselves would not be received well, and that some not ideal circumstance was likely to happen when they spoke up. What could this mean? This could mean that maybe the caregivers became really distressed when we spoke up. Maybe the caregiver themselves got really overwhelmed by, their child expressing some sort of upset emotion, or that they clearly wanted something. Maybe the caregiver couldn't really regulate themselves around that, and they became really distressed. And when they became really distressed, it felt like maybe they would disconnect from the child, or because they were in such distress and feeling like, oh my gosh, and all of a sudden they were dysregulated, it would make the child feel like something was now unsafe. Kids are looking to their parents to sense, like, are we still good? Are we connected? Is the world around us safe? Like, are we good? And if your caregiver would kind of fall apart in some way if you spoke up about a way that you were feeling, or if you were upset about something that you wanted, then that could be the start of us learning that we shouldn't speak up, or that when we speak up, it upsets other people. Another thing that can happen is that people just don't listen. Our caregivers like simply just do not listen. I find in this case, we end up having some other way that we learned that we could get noticed, whether that's becoming angry, or that's becoming passive aggressive, or maybe that's kind of like acting out in other parts of the relationship. And so we opt for doing that instead of like direct vulnerable communication, because nobody listened when it was vulnerable. So it had to escalate or kind of reform into something else in order to be noticed. And if we've not done some reflection on that, we're for sure still doing that to elicit attentiveness from people in relationships, and as a way of starting that communication about what we need, again, that's not usually direct and vulnerable. Another thing that we may have learned is to curb what we're saying in certain categories, right? Like I've worked with clients, and part of what came up in that example coaching session that I did on people pleasing, I think it was episode 58, what we uncovered was that speaking up about positive emotions was encouraged and was modeled, but what was not modeled was speaking about really negative or heavy emotions. So when the child then was feeling those feelings, not only did they not express them and talk about them and elicit support, but they actually started to shame and guilt themselves about, oh, I don't see anybody else having this. I think that this must mean something's wrong with me and I'm bad in some way. And then we learn to not talk about and not express those types of things because of what was modeled like implicitly, or maybe what was said explicitly. Like, don't be upset, don't cry, you have nothing to be worried about, don't be, like it can be explicitly told to us, or it can be learned by what was modeled, or how we could sense people would react when we brought certain versions of ourselves or certain kinds of expression, so on and so forth. So that could be another lens to look at this through. Is there one type or one category of expression that you feel more uncomfortable really speaking up for? And again, where did you learn that dynamic dynamic was not welcome or was not safe in some way. What's funny with intuition as well is I find that children who are really sensitive and very intuitive about what's happening, particularly with their caregivers, sometimes what can happen is like they can speak up and make observations, and because the caregiver or parents can't see the truth, they don't want to see the truth, they can actually then tell the child, no, you're wrong about this. And that can create kind of a block in speaking up for your intuition or like believing your intuition, because you were observing things that like your parents maybe weren't even seeing in themselves and sure as heck did not want to face. And so if like in your innocence or something, like you spoke up about it, you were probably shot down or met with some sort of like emotion because the truth that you saw triggered your parent. Right? So that can be kind of another version of not speaking up, specifically around my intuitive girlies and guys. And one of the last things that I'll say about this is I think that the generation who raised most of us did not have really great communication or conflict resolution skills, of course, because they were not taught them. And so sometimes if you don't understand that people expressing themselves or expressing how they feel or having questions about something isn't like a threat to your character, right? It isn't a threat to your values or your goals, especially if you can view yourself as being on the same team as somebody. And so I wonder if there's a lot of people who might listen to this and recognize a pattern of if they were, again, innocently sharing how they felt and it wasn't the same as their caregiver, or if they had like innocent and maybe even smart questions about why things are going a certain way and the caregiver couldn't tolerate that moment of not being on the same page, or somebody who wasn't 100% behind them and like supporting exactly what they said with no questions, then if all of a sudden it would be like a fight or something, or if it felt like it would be like conflict, you know? And that would be really confusing for a child because they're like, I'm not saying this to be disconnected or even to argue with you. Like, this is just like naturally a question, which is, again, like human nature. And then what you learn in that is, oh, I don't speak out if it seems like it might be against what somebody else does, because then they're just going to get upset. And I don't want that to happen. And that might have even been more passive than what I'm describing. It might have been kind of the flip, where you really were only getting attention or engaged with in that positive way if you were 100% on board with your caregiver's perspective or plan. That they would start to ignore you, or start to give you a cold shoulder, or kind of have this dismissive energy with you if you were not like really positively reinforcing them. And so maybe that was also like an implicit thing to learn, that like the way that I really connect with people is if I am positively affirming and engaging and supporting what they want, and that there's not room for what I want when I'm seeking out connection with people. Oh, the last thing that the guides are showing me is that there also might have been some situations where when you shared something that was vulnerable, you had caregivers kind of prey on that, right? Maybe they would mischaracterize what you would say, or they would kind of like use that vulnerability as a way to kind of like latch into you in a way that didn't feel good and didn't feel supportive. And really the best way I can describe this is like when you did open yourself up, it didn't feel like you were supported and connected to, but it felt like something icky would happen. And it's like you were getting like the wrong kind of attention from your caregivers when you did voice something, particularly if it was vulnerable. And so it taught you like to close off and just not say something to them and really not speak up for yourself. It is really empowering and really helpful to recognize where all of this originated from, like the patterns that this all originated from, so that we can start to debunk the story here. Right? Like it can be true that your caregivers, maybe not even maliciously, but just them doing their best, modeled to you, or at least the way that you perceived what they were modeling meant that when you spoke up, XYZ happened, and therefore you shouldn't speak up, right? And it's important for us to see that story so that we can see, wait a minute, that doesn't apply to everybody. And maybe that wasn't even exactly true in that situation. It's just the way my child brain interpreted it. Or if it was something that was more overt or explicit or even malicious, you could say, wow, like that is really what they were putting out there and where they're at, but they are not the model of the kind of person I want to be in relationship with. I don't want to continue to be in relationship with people who are extremely emotionally immature or toxic and or unwilling to do work on themselves and be accountable and do some of that labor to create a healthy dynamic. Like that's not the kind of person I want to be in relationship with. So it doesn't make sense for me to apply the rules of how I engage with them to other people. Because in fact, if I continue continue to follow those rules of engagement, I'm going to keep attracting more people like them. And I feel like that's kind of the point that I wanted to make. When we don't speak up, we don't co-create a situation where we can be expressed. We don't co-create a situation where we can be authentic. We don't co-create a situation where we can be safe. And we don't co-create the service that our voice has to the collective. Okay? Your perspective and what you think and what you want is an important piece of this kind of collective puzzle. The way that our intuition moves through us, I believe, is how like God is moving through us to create this like divine design that ultimately serves everybody's highest and best good when we're acting from our heart. So yes, it is important that you have the experience of feeling at peace and feeling good enough and feeling expressed and authentic and at joy and balanced in yourself, and being able to speak up for yourself is a huge part of that equation. But your voice is also of service to people. It's of service to your relationships. It's of service in the way that it ripples and has that effect out into the world. And you repressing that is not of service to you, and it's not of service to the world. It is of service to people in relationships or interactions that you're in that require other people's silence in order to uphold their own issues that they're refusing to deal with. But those are the only people it serves. And like, why are we still serving them? There are so many people out there. There's so many people awakening. There's so many people doing this work who want to be in healthy reciprocal relationships, who want to be supportive of other people and want to encourage hearing other people's voices, even when it feels a little bit vulnerable, or even if what they say might challenge our own self-perception or cause a little bit of a rupture for a moment, or force us into a sort of like conflict resolution or repair cycle. Like there's so many people who are really willing to do that. And I feel like my girlies who have a hard time speaking up really need to hear that, because probably what you're experiencing is that it goes awry if you speak up, or nobody's really interested in hearing what you have to say, or you are feeling this crushing anxiety about what it might mean if you speak up. That's not really the truth of what's possible for you. What's possible is when you speak up, people see you and they love what they see. What's true is when you speak up, God can speak into the world, spirit can speak into the world, the divine can speak into the world. When you speak love and light and joy and hope into the world, compassion into the world, you're literally helping heal the world. And even when you have to bring something that doesn't feel like all love and light, like even when you got to bring something real and honest, that is also of service to people. Now, of course, you might need to learn the skill of how can I express myself in ways that takes responsibility for my part and is kind and respectful, but also lets other people be responsible for their part or doesn't eclipse their own feelings. Because all of these are communication and conflict resolution skills that you probably were not modeled. And how would you know them if you weren't modeled them and you hadn't been taught them, right? There might be a little bit of a learning curve of how you can start to do that, and that's okay. Believe it or not, that can be a pretty fast learning curve. But what happens when you speak up and you have those skills and you're doing it with another person who also has those skills is that actually conflict is an opportunity to deepen trust and deepen intimacy. And I don't mean like sexual intimacy necessarily. I mean like the kind of intimacy where two people reveal some of their vulnerabilities and they're met with care and they're met with love and they're met with support and respect. Right? That can actually be what strengthens relationships. That can be what helps strengthen and heal your own self-perception through the repair of those things when you speak up. That is what creates those really deeply fulfilling relationships where you see each other really fully and you can talk about really deep stuff. And like, if that's the kind of relationship you're craving, it requires you speaking up. It requires your vulnerability. And it also requires your discernment about what people are capable and willing to meet you in that way. Because if those are the kinds of relationships you want, if that's the kind of relationship that you're committed to bringing to yourself, and therefore you're not going to tolerate from other people if they just are not aligned in that, then you also have to be able to discern when somebody else just isn't aligned in the kind of relationship that they can maintain. And you have to learn how to be able to walk away from that so that you are honoring the part of you who wants to speak up safely. If you continue to stay in spaces and relationships and dynamics where speaking up is not safe, you are affirming this idea that what you say does not matter. It's not important enough and it's not safe for you to say that by your actions of staying in it. what a wonderful way to honor the little kid in you, the pure part of you, the soul part of you, than by making choices and putting yourself in spaces and relationships where they can speak freely and safely. And when you do that, speaking up is something that feels easier. It feels more available to you, and therefore you can learn to incorporate as a natural part of your life to bring balance back into your body, back into your emotional, mental, physical, spiritual health. And you can start to step into what your role is on this planet, into your soul paths and your contracts, right? So that you can be more of an active participant in your life. When you speak up, you're blessing the world with your essence and your perspective. So in summary, let's revisit and reflect on what we learned or anticipated would happen if we speak up, and let's challenge those stories. A lot of times it was because other people couldn't receive or hold space for us. We internalized that to think that maybe what we have to say isn't important, or it's not trustworthy, or it's not accurate, or maybe we took on a story that would lead to conflict, and conflict is only ever bad and would only ever lead to awkwardness and disconnection and passive aggressiveness or whatever, which is not true. When you disagree or have a rupture with somebody who is emotionally immature, doesn't have conflict resolution skills, and is not interested in it, then those things happen. But when you have a rupture with somebody who does have those skills and is motivated and doing repair, it actually makes a relationship stronger. So we got to challenge those stories, and then we might need to learn those skills of how can I be really confident that I'm speaking up for myself in that really balanced way, and also how can I grow my discernment so that I'm choosing places that are safe, aka will have that healthy capacity and receiving, will have that healthy conflict resolution, so that me speaking up is productive, and I start building new associations with all the positive things that happen when I speak and show my mind. And so I can stop reinforcing this story that my voice doesn't matter, that it's not safe, that it's not worthy of being heard, because it is worthy, it is important. And it feels like it's something that a lot of us who have this deep sensitivity and also deep wisdom, by the way, need to learn so that we can do our part in the way that our collective is evolving, and do our part in our service in this world, and also be able to experience the fullness that we deserve as well, which is that bliss, which is that joy, which is that fulfillment, which is that safety, being ourselves. So that was what I wanted to share today. I hope that this resonates for you. I have so many people I work with that have a little bit of a sticking point on this, which is why I was so happy to talk about this. I tend to do a lot of coaching work with people who struggle with different versions of this. So if you're not already on my email list to get my weekly channeled messages or my free resources around these topics that I coach on, or if you're not already on the wait list for my next group program, I highly encourage it, because I love, love, love connecting with you guys and bringing through channeled messages like this that support and help your healing journey for things just like this. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. DM me with your thoughts and takeaways. You know I love that too. And I'll see you guys next week for more breakthroughs. Bye everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Breakthroughs with Bree. But before you go, please take a moment to either rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, or share this episode or maybe one of your other favorites with friends or loved ones that you think might enjoy or benefit from this content. Both of those things help more than you know, so that I can keep creating these episodes to help us all have more breakthroughs. Remember, you can connect with me on social media, sign up for my email list, hear what products, services, or events that I'm currently offering, all in the link in the show description, or by visiting my website, healingwithbree.net. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support and for the time that you're taking to heal yourself and align more with your beautiful soul, as it helps us all so much more than you realize. I'll see you all next week for more breakthroughs.